They said nothing good ever came from something that cheap. But sometimes the things people laugh at are the ones that remember the truth the longest. And on a cold morning just outside a fading steel town, Ethan Cole stood in front of a rusted warehouse he had bought for less than $2,000. The metal siding groaning softly in the wind, as if the building itself was breathing through years of dust and silence. The kind of place most folks drove past without a second glance. But Ethan didn't look at it like that. He stood still, hands in his jacket pockets, eyes steady and distant like a man who had learned to listen more than he spoke. Beside him, Rex, a 6-year-old German shepherd with a thick gray and cream coat, stepped forward slowly, his paws quiet against the cracked concrete, ears lifting towards something that wasn't there, at least not to human ears. The town behind them still carried the echo of laughter from the day before, men at the diner shaking their heads, calling it a waste, saying the place wouldn't even hold through the first snowstorm. But Ethan had heard worse in his life, and silence had taught him not to answer everything. The wind slipped through the broken seams of the building, carrying the faint scent of iron and old wood. And for a moment, everything felt still in that strange way that sits just before something begins. Rex stopped near the center of the floor, his body going rigid, nose lowering, then lifting again, as if tracking something buried deep beneath layers of time. Ethan watched him carefully, not rushing, not questioning, because in the years they had spent together, Rex had learned to notice what others ignored. A low sound hummed beneath the boards, faint enough to be dismissed, steady enough to be real, and Ethan felt it too. Not with his ears, but somewhere quieter, somewhere memory lived. He stepped forward slowly, boots pressing into the worn planks, the wood creaking under his weight, the sound echoing through the hollow space like a heartbeat that didn't belong to him. Rex let out a soft breath, not a bark, not a warning, just a signal, and placed his paw firmly on one spot, holding it there, eyes fixed on Ethan as if asking a question only trust could answer. The air shifted, subtle but certain, and for the first time since he bought the place, Ethan realized this warehouse wasn't empty at all. It had been waiting, and maybe, just maybe, it had been waiting for someone who still knew how to listen. The sound did not stop after that moment. It settled into the space like something that had always been there, waiting patiently beneath the surface. Ethan crouched slowly beside Rex, his gloved hand pressing against the worn wooden boards. And there it was again, a faint pulse, steady and deliberate, not loud, not urgent, but consistent enough to resist being ignored. Every few seconds it returned, like a distant knock traveling through layers of earth and time. Rex lowered his head closer, ears angled forward, his breathing slow but focused, as if he was listening to a language older than words. Ethan closed his eyes for a brief moment, not out of fear, but to feel it more clearly. And something in that rhythm stirred a memory he could not fully place, something from years ago when silence meant more than sound. He opened his eyes and glanced around the empty warehouse, sunlight slipping through narrow gaps in the metal walls, painting thin lines across the dusty floor, particles drifting lazily in the cold air. Everything looked abandoned, forgotten, but the feeling beneath his palm told a different story. This place was not empty. It was holding something. Rex shifted his weight and tapped the same spot twice with his paw, not impatient, just certain. Ethan nodded slightly, more to himself than to the dog, and stood up, moving toward the far wall where a pile of old tools and broken shelving leaned like relics of another life. He searched quietly, pushing aside rusted metal and splintered wood until he found what he needed, a crowbar, worn but solid, the kind of tool that did not ask questions, only answered them. When he returned, Rex had not moved, still, guarding that exact spot as if it mattered more than anything else in the world. Ethan placed the tip of the crowbar between two boards and applied steady pressure. The wood resisted at first, groaning softly, as if reluctant to give up its secret. Then with a sharp crack, it shifted, dust rising into the air as the first plank lifted free. The smell beneath was different, colder, older, like air that had not moved in decades. Ethan paused, listening again. The pulse was clearer now, not louder, but closer, as if whatever lay beneath had noticed them too. He worked carefully, removing one board at a time, each movement slow and deliberate, until a dark space revealed itself below, just enough to see. That the foundation was not solid ground as expected, but something else, something hollow. Rex leaned forward slightly, a low hum building in his chest. Not fear, not warning, but recognition. Ethan brushed away the remaining dust with his hand and exposed the edge of something metallic, dull and worn, a surface hidden just beneath the floorboards. He cleared more of it, revealing a rectangular outline, the faint shape of a hatch, its edges lined with rivets and sealed tight as if it had been placed there with purpose, not accident. Ethan exhaled slowly, the kind of breath that comes when a question begins to form into an answer, and for the first time since he stepped inside the warehouse, he understood that this was not just a forgotten building. It was a door, and it had just started to open. The metal surface was colder than the air around it, as if it had been holding the absence of sunlight for years. Ethan ran his hand across the hatch, feeling the rough texture beneath his glove, each rivet set with intention, not by chance. And for a moment he simply stayed there, crouched in the dim light, listening to the quiet rhythm that still pulsed from below, steady, patient, almost aware. Rex shifted closer, his nose hovering inches above the seam. Then he looked up at Ethan, eyes bright, waiting, not anxious, not afraid, just certain that whatever lay beneath mattered. Ethan leaned back slightly and examined the edges more carefully, brushing away the last of the dust, until he found a recessed handle, nearly invisible beneath years of neglect. He pressed his fingers into it and pulled, but it did not move. The seal held firm, as if time itself had been asked to keep it closed. He exhaled slowly, then reached for the crowbar again, positioning it at the edge of the hatch, applying pressure with controlled strength. The metal resisted at first, giving only a faint groan that echoed softly into the hollow beneath. Then, gradually, it shifted, just enough to break whatever hold had kept it locked in place for so long. A thin line of darkness appeared as the hatch lifted slightly, and from that narrow opening, a breath of air rose upward, cool and still, carrying a scent unlike anything above. Not decay, not dampness, but something cleaner, older, like stone and silence untouched by time. Rex stepped back half a pace, not in fear, but in acknowledgement, his ears still forward, his body aligned with the opening as if he understood this was the threshold of something larger than both of them. Ethan widened the gap slowly, careful not to rush, until the hatch opened enough to reveal what lay beneath. A set of narrow metal steps descending into darkness, each one worn but intact, disappearing into a depth that swallowed the light. The sound grew clearer now, no longer just a faint pulse, but a pattern, a repetition that felt almost mechanical, yet too steady to be random. Ethan sat back on his heels, eyes fixed on the opening, his mind tracing through fragments of memory, places where hidden structures existed beneath ordinary ground, where what was buried was never meant to be lost, only protected. He reached into his pack and pulled out a small flashlight, the beam cutting through the dim warehouse air before angling downward into the tunnel. The light revealed smooth concrete walls, clean lines, no collapse, no decay. Everything below seemed preserved, deliberate, waiting. Rex let out a soft breath and placed one paw on the edge of the opening, then paused, glancing back at Ethan as if asking permission. Ethan nodded once, a quiet agreement between them, and in that moment, the warehouse above them no longer felt abandoned. It felt like a cover, a shell built to hide something that had endured long after everyone else had forgotten. And as the light stretched deeper into the darkness below, Ethan realized that whatever had been hidden here was never meant to disappear. It was meant to be found, but only by someone willing to look past what the world had already dismissed. The first step down carried a hollow echo that lingered longer than it should have, as if the tunnel beneath was not just empty space, but something that remembered every sound it had ever held. Ethan moved carefully, one hand gripping the edge of the opening while the other guided the flashlight beam downward. Rex descended just ahead of him, silent and steady, his paws finding each metal step with a confidence that did not come from sight alone. The air grew cooler with every foot they went down, not the sharp cold of winter but a deep, settled chill that belonged to stone and stillness. And that same rhythm followed them, steady and unbroken, a pulse that seemed to come from the walls themselves. Ethan paused halfway down, turning slightly to glance back up at the faint square of light above. The warehouse now distant, reduced to a thin frame of gray daylight. It looked smaller from here, less like a structure and more like a lid placed carefully over something meant to stay hidden. Rex reached the bottom first and stepped onto a smooth concrete floor, his ears still lifted, his body angled forward. Waiting, Ethan joined him, boots touching down with a muted thud, the sound traveling down the corridor ahead, revealing its length in the way echoes stretched and softened into the dark. The tunnel extended straight ahead, at least 20 yards by the reach of his light. The walls reinforced with clean lines and evenly spaced supports. No cracks, no signs of collapse. Everything here had been built to last, not temporarily, not carelessly, but with purpose, the kind of purpose that did not rush. Ethan moved forward slowly, the beam of his flashlight sweeping across the surfaces, catching small details, faint markings etched into the concrete. Numbers and symbols worn but still visible. Rex stopped abruptly near one section of the wall and tilted his head, listening again. The pulse felt stronger here, more defined, like a heartbeat moving closer to the surface. Ethan placed his palm against the wall and felt it. Not movement, not vibration exactly, but a presence, something steady behind the barrier, something contained. He followed Rex a few more steps until the tunnel opened slightly into a wider chamber. And there, along one side, sat a series of old crates stacked in precise rows, their wooden surfaces aged but intact, each one sealed with metal bands that had dulled with time. The air around them felt different, heavier, as if it carried the weight of whatever had been stored here for years beyond. Counting, Rex approached the nearest crate but did not touch it. Instead, he circled once, then stopped and looked back at Ethan, eyes bright, waiting again. Always waiting for the moment when the human would see what the dog already understood. Ethan stepped closer, the light falling across the crate's surface, revealing a faint emblem stamped into the wood. Something official, something forgotten, and beneath it, a set of numbers arranged in a way that suggested inventory, not abandonment. He reached out slowly, fingers brushing the edge of the lid, feeling the solidness of it. The quiet certainty that whatever was inside had not been disturbed in a very long time. The pulse in the walls continued, steady and patient, and in that stillness, Ethan realized this place had never been lost. It had been kept, preserved beneath layers of time and silence, waiting not for chance, but for someone who would come far enough, listen long enough, and choose to open what others had walked away. From the wood of the crate felt solid beneath Ethan's hand, not brittle or weakened by time, but preserved in a way that suggested intention rather than neglect. He paused for a moment, listening again to the steady rhythm that had followed them down into this hidden space. It was clearer now, almost synchronized with his own breathing, as if the tunnel itself was alive in a quiet, patient way. Rex stood close, his body still, his gaze fixed on the crate, not restless, not uncertain, just waiting. Ethan adjusted his grip and slowly lifted the metal latch. The sound of it breaking its long silence echoed softly through the chamber, a small sound in a place that seemed to magnify everything. The lid resisted at first, then gave way with a low creak, releasing a faint breath of air that carried a scent unlike the warehouse above, cleaner, almost untouched. Ethan raised the lid just enough to see inside, and for a moment, he did not move at all. The beam of his flashlight settled into the crate, reflecting back in a way that made him narrow his eyes slightly, not from confusion, but from the unexpected weight of what he was seeing. Rows of metal bars rested neatly inside, their surfaces dull, beneath a thin layer of dust, but unmistakable in shape and form. Gold, stacked with precision, untouched, and waiting in silence for decades. Ethan did not reach in right away. He simply stood there, absorbing the reality of it, not with excitement, not with disbelief, but with a quiet understanding that this was never about chance. Rex exhaled softly and stepped closer, lowering his head near the edge of the crate, his ears still lifted as if the discovery itself was only part of something larger. Ethan glanced at the other crates lining the wall, each one identical, each one sealed the same way, and the realization settled slowly, not all at once, but piece by piece. This was not a single hidden stash. It was a system, a place designed to store, to protect, to remain unseen until the right moment. He closed the lid gently, the sound softer this time, more deliberate, as if acknowledging the weight of what had been found. The pulse in the walls continued, steady and unchanged, as if it had no urgency, no need to rush. It had been here long before him, and would remain if left undisturbed. Ethan stepped back slightly, running a hand through his hair, his thoughts moving carefully, not toward what he could take, but toward why this had been left here in the first place. Rex turned and looked deeper into the tunnel, his body shifting in that subtle way that meant there was more, always more, and Ethan followed his gaze. The beam of light stretching beyond the chamber into darkness that had not yet been explored. The gold behind him was real, undeniable, but it did not feel like the end of the story. It felt like the beginning of a question, one that had been waiting for someone patient enough to ask it. And as the silence settled once more around them, Ethan understood that whatever had been hidden here was not simply lost wealth. It was a message, one that had survived years of being overlooked, waiting for someone who would not just find it, but understand it. The deeper stretch of the tunnel did not feel empty. It felt intentional, as if every inch of concrete had been poured with a purpose that extended far beyond simple storage. Ethan moved forward slowly, the beam of his flashlight gliding across the floor, revealing faint tracks etched into the surface, not recent, but preserved in a way that suggested careful use rather than abandonment. Rex walked ahead with quiet precision, his nose low, following a path that could not be seen but clearly still existed in his senses. The steady pulse continued, but now it seemed to guide rather than echo, leading them deeper into the structure. The air shifted again, carrying a subtle warmth compared to the chamber behind them. Not enough to notice at first, but enough to feel over time. Ethan paused and placed his hand against the wall once more, and this time the sensation was clearer, not just presence, but movement beyond, something working, something still active after all these years. He narrowed his eyes slightly, his thoughts aligning with old instincts. Places built underground did not remain active without reason, especially not for this long. Rex stopped near a reinforced doorway set into the wall, different from anything they had passed so far. Thicker, sealed with a precision that spoke of security rather than storage. The dog tilted his head, then stepped closer, placing his paw gently against the base of the door, his ears flicking as the rhythm seemed to gather there. Ethan approached carefully, studying the surface. The metal was smoother here, less worn, as if this section had been protected even more carefully than the rest. A small panel sat to the side, its surface dim but intact, not modern, but not entirely obsolete either. He brushed away a thin layer of dust, revealing faint markings, instructions perhaps, or identifiers from a system long forgotten by most, but not entirely erased. Ethan exhaled slowly, his breath steady, his mind working through possibilities without rushing to conclusions. This was no accident, no random hiding place. This was a facility, something built with foresight, something meant to endure without attention. Rex let out a low, steady breath, not a warning, not fear, but something closer to recognition, as if whatever lay beyond that door matched the rhythm he had been following since they entered. Ethan placed his hand on the cold surface, feeling the faint vibration beneath, stronger now, more defined, almost like the hum of something that had never fully shut down. He glanced down at Rex, who met his gaze with calm certainty, the kind that did not question what came next, only waited for it. Ethan stepped back slightly and examined the edges of the door, searching for a way in, not forcing, not breaking, but understanding that something built this carefully would also have a way to be opened. And as the quiet pulse continued to echo through the walls, steady and patient, he realized that whatever lay beyond was not just part of the past. It was still here, still functioning in its own silent way, waiting for someone who had come far enough to reach it, and who would choose carefully what to do once it was found. The surface of the panel beside the door felt smoother than anything else in the tunnel, as if it had been protected from time itself. Ethan leaned closer, brushing away the last layer of dust until faint symbols revealed themselves beneath his fingertips, not random markings, but structured, deliberate, a system that had once been understood by someone who built this place to last beyond memory. Rex stood still at his side, his breathing slow, his ears shifting slightly with each pulse that now seemed to gather around the door like a quiet signal. Ethan studied the panel carefully, noticing a small recessed slot and a series of worn ridges beside it, not electronic in the modern sense, but mechanical, precise, something designed to function without reliance on anything that could easily fail. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small multi-tool, using the edge to gently press along the ridges, testing, not forcing, feeling for resistance, for alignment. The metal responded subtly, a faint shift, almost imperceptible, but enough to confirm that the mechanism was still intact. The pulse in the wall grew slightly stronger, not louder, but closer, as if whatever lay behind the door had acknowledged the movement. Rex took one step back, then sat, calm but alert, his eyes fixed on Ethan. Trusting, waiting, Ethan adjusted his grip and applied a bit more pressure, guiding the tool along the groove until something clicked deep within the structure. A low, steady sound followed, not sudden, not dramatic, but controlled, like a system waking up after a long rest. The door did not swing open. Instead, it released slowly, the seal breaking with a soft exhale of air that carried a different scent than the rest of the tunnel, cleaner, almost filtered, as if the space beyond had been maintained in a way that defied the years above it. Ethan stepped back as the door shifted inward just enough to create a narrow opening. Darkness filled the gap at first, but then a faint glow appeared deeper inside, not bright, not artificial in the way modern lights were, but steady, warm, like something designed to endure without drawing attention. Rex rose immediately and moved closer, his body relaxed but focused, no hesitation in his movement. Ethan pushed the door a little wider, just enough to step through, the beam of his flashlight blending with the soft, ambient light ahead, revealing a room unlike anything they had seen so far. The walls smoother, cleaner, lined with panels and structures that had not deteriorated, as if this part of the tunnel had been sealed off from time itself. The pulse that had followed them now felt centered here, no longer echoing from the walls, but originating from within the space, steady and alive in a quiet, contained way. Ethan stepped inside slowly, his boots making almost no sound against the polished floor. And for the first time since entering the warehouse, he felt something shift within him, not fear, not excitement, but recognition, the kind that comes when a place is not just discovered, but understood to have been. Waiting, and as Rex moved forward with quiet certainty, guiding him deeper into the softly lit room, Ethan realized that whatever this place was, it had not been built to hide something from the world. It had been built to preserve something for it. The room carried a quiet order that felt untouched by the years above it, as if time had chosen to move around it rather than through it. Ethan stood just inside the threshold, his eyes adjusting to the soft, steady glow that seemed to come from narrow panels embedded along the walls, their light warm and consistent, not flickering, not fading, just present. Rex moved ahead without hesitation, his paws silent against the smooth floor, his body aligned with a purpose that felt almost instinctive. The pulse that had guided them this far now felt centered within the space, not echoing but originating, a steady rhythm that seemed to breathe through the room itself. Ethan followed slowly, the beam of his flashlight lowering as it became less necessary, revealing rows of structured units along the walls, metal cabinets, sealed containers, and surfaces that showed no sign of decay, each one arranged with precision, labeled in a system that had once been clear and important. He stepped closer to one of the panels, brushing his fingers across its surface, and as he did, a faint response followed, not immediate, not mechanical in a modern sense, but reactive, like something recognizing touch after a long absence. Rex paused near the center of the room, his ears tilting slightly as he listened deeper, not to the space around them, but to something beneath it, something layered below even this hidden level. Ethan noticed it too, the pulse shifting subtly, drawing inward, focusing toward a single point ahead. He turned his attention in that direction and saw a raised platform at the far end of the room, simple in design but clearly central to whatever this place had been built for. It stood slightly elevated, with a narrow console embedded into its surface, not large, not complex, but intentional, like the heart of a system designed to function quietly and without interruption. Rex moved toward it slowly, stopping just short, his body still, his gaze fixed, waiting once more. Ethan approached with measured steps, his mind not racing, not overwhelmed, but steady, processing each detail with the calm clarity he had learned long ago. He placed his hand on the edge of the platform and felt it immediately. The pulse, stronger here, not just a vibration, but a presence, something contained and sustained over time. He leaned closer to the console, noticing faint markings along its surface, worn but legible, instructions. Perhaps, or identifiers meant for someone who would one day return, or someone who would finally arrive. He hesitated for a brief moment, not out of fear, but out of respect for what this place represented, then slowly reached forward and rested his hand against the console. The response was subtle at first, a gentle shift in the light around the room, the glow deepening slightly, the pulse aligning with a new rhythm. As if acknowledging the contact, Rex exhaled softly and lowered his head, calm and certain. And in that moment, Ethan understood that this was not just a hidden chamber filled with forgotten wealth. It was something more, something preserved with purpose, waiting not just to be found, but to be activated by someone willing to understand its meaning. And as the quiet system around him stirred in response to his presence, the room seemed to come alive in the most silent way possible, revealing that what had been hidden here was never meant to remain buried forever, only until the right moment. And perhaps, the right person. The moment his hand rested fully against the console, the rhythm beneath his palm shifted with quiet precision, no longer distant or ambient, but responsive, as if the system had been waiting for that exact contact to awaken something deeper. The soft glow along the walls brightened just enough to reveal more detail, fine lines etched into the surfaces around him, patterns that had been invisible before now emerging with clarity. Ethan did not pull his hand away. He remained still, allowing the moment to unfold without interruption. Rex stood beside him, calm and grounded, his presence steady like an anchor in a place that felt suspended outside of time. A low hum rose from beneath the platform, not loud, not intrusive, but constant, like a hidden current finally finding motion again. Ethan glanced down and noticed a thin seam along the center of the console beginning to separate, slowly and deliberately, revealing a narrow compartment within. The movement was smooth, controlled, untouched by the strain of years. Inside, a small metal case rested in perfect alignment, its surface polished in contrast to everything else around it, as if it had been preserved with greater care than even the gold above. Ethan hesitated for a brief moment, not out of uncertainty, but out of respect for what this might represent. Then he reached forward and lifted the case gently. It was lighter than he expected, balanced, intentional, the kind of object designed to be handled with purpose. Rex leaned in slightly, his nose hovering near the edge. Then he exhaled softly and stepped back, as if confirming that this was the right piece to be taken. Ethan turned the case in his hands and found a small latch at its front. He opened it slowly, the hinge moving without resistance, and inside, instead of gold or anything of obvious material value, there lay a stack of documents, carefully sealed within a protective sleeve, along with a single key, old but pristine, its surface engraved with markings that matched the symbols on the walls. Ethan lifted the documents first, sliding them free with careful precision. The paper was thick, preserved, and as he unfolded the top page, the meaning began to take shape. Names, dates, instructions, a record of something far greater than hidden wealth. This was not just a storage site. It was a safeguard, a place built to protect resources meant for a purpose beyond ownership. The language spoke of transition, of timing, of responsibility, and as Ethan read, the quiet truth settled into him with steady clarity. This had never been meant for someone to claim. It had been meant for someone to carry. Forward, Rex shifted his stance slightly, his ears relaxing now, the tension replaced with something softer, as if the question that had guided him here had finally been answered. Ethan looked back at the room, at the system that had endured in silence, at the path that had led them beneath something the world had dismissed, and he understood now that the real discovery was not the gold or the tunnel or even the hidden room. It was the responsibility that came with finding it. And as the soft light continued to glow around him, steady and unwavering, Ethan closed the case gently, holding it with both hands. aware that whatever came next would not be decided by what he had found, but by what he chose to do with it. The weight of the metal case felt different now that Ethan understood what it carried, not heavy in his hands, but steady in a way that settled deeper than anything physical. He stood there for a moment, letting the quiet of the room surround him again, the soft glow unchanged, the pulse beneath the platform continuing its calm rhythm as if nothing had shifted, yet everything had. Rex moved a few steps away and turned slowly, scanning the room one more time, not searching anymore, but observing, as if confirming that what needed to be found had already been revealed. Ethan placed the documents carefully back into the case and closed it with a gentle motion, the latch clicking into place with a sound that echoed lightly across the smooth walls. He looked down at the key resting inside, its engraved surface catching the faint light, and without hesitation, he lifted it, turning it slightly between his fingers. The markings aligned with the symbols he had seen throughout the tunnel, not decorative, but purposeful, part of a system that extended beyond this room. He glanced toward the doorway they had entered through, the path behind them still open, still quiet, and then back toward the platform, where a narrow slot had become visible along its side, subtle, almost hidden unless one knew to look for it. Rex stepped closer again, his tail still, his ears forward, his attention fixed on the same place. Ethan moved toward the slot and held the key just above it, pausing for a brief second, not out of doubt, but to acknowledge the moment. Then he inserted it slowly, the fit precise, exact, as if it had never been meant for anything else. When he turned it, the response came immediately, not loud or abrupt, but deep and resonant, like a system aligning after a long silence. The pulse beneath the floor shifted again, expanding outward through the room, and the light along the walls brightened slightly, revealing more of what had been hidden in plain sight. Panels along the far wall began to open in sequence, sliding back with smooth, controlled motion, exposing rows of sealed compartments, each one marked with the same structured precision as everything else in the space. Ethan stepped back slightly, watching as the room revealed itself further, not with chaos or urgency, but with intention, as if every part of it had been waiting for this exact moment to unfold. Rex remained calm, his posture steady, his presence grounded, the kind of stillness that comes when instinct recognizes completion. Ethan walked slowly toward the newly opened compartments, his eyes scanning the markings, the labels, understanding now that this was not just a place of storage, but a system of distribution, of protection, something built to ensure that what was hidden here would one day be used, not wasted, not forgotten. The realization settled quietly within him, not overwhelming, not dramatic, but certain. This was never about finding something valuable. It was about becoming someone responsible. And as the room stood fully revealed around him, illuminated in a soft, steady glow, Ethan understood that the next step was not about discovery. It was about choice. And whatever he chose would shape not just what this place meant, but what it would become. The room no longer felt like a place hidden beneath the world. It felt like a place waiting to return to it. Ethan stood quietly in the soft glow as the opened compartments revealed their contents, not chaotic piles of wealth, but carefully organized reserves, each sealed unit labeled with purpose, dates, destinations, and instructions that spoke of a system built to outlast the people who created it. He stepped closer to one of the compartments and gently opened it. Inside were not just bars of gold, but documents, maps, and records tied to communities, towns, and names that had likely faded from memory. Above ground, Rex moved slowly along the row, his nose passing over each section without urgency, as if confirming that everything here was exactly where it was meant to be. Ethan picked up one of the documents and unfolded it carefully, his eyes scanning the lines as understanding deepened. This was not stored for profit or power. It was prepared as a safeguard, a reserve meant to restore, rebuild, and support when the right moment came, the kind of foresight that required patience beyond a single lifetime. He lowered the paper slightly and looked around again, the scale of it now clearer. This was not one secret. It was many, all connected, all waiting. The pulse beneath the room had softened, no longer guiding, no longer calling, but steady and calm, as if its purpose had been fulfilled the moment it was recognized. Rex returned to Ethan's side and sat quietly. His posture relaxed for the first time since they had entered the warehouse. His ears no longer searching, his gaze steady and grounded. Ethan exhaled slowly, a breath that carried the weight of what he had learned, not overwhelming, but grounding, the kind that settles a man into a decision rather than pushing him toward one. He turned back toward the platform and the open panels, understanding now that the system had not just revealed itself randomly. It had responded, measured, waited, and then opened only as much as it needed to, trusting that whoever stood here would choose carefully what came next. He walked back to the console and placed his hand lightly against it once more, not to activate anything further, but to acknowledge the connection that had formed. The light around him remained steady, unchanged, as if to say the rest would not be decided by the system, but by him. Rex rose and stood beside him, calm and present, the silent partner who had led him through every step without question. And in that still moment, Ethan understood that this place had never been meant to stay hidden forever. It had been waiting for someone who would not just uncover it, but carry its purpose forward without losing what made it worth protecting in the first place. And as the quiet settled around them, once more, he knew that whatever came next would not be about what he had found, but about what he chose to preserve, and who he chose to become because of it. The silence that followed felt different now, not empty, not uncertain, but settled in a way that carried quiet direction. Ethan stood near the platform with the case held firmly in his hands, his gaze moving slowly across the room one more time, taking in every detail with a clarity that had not been there before. The compartments, the markings, the careful structure of everything around him. It was no longer a mystery to be solved. It was a responsibility waiting to be accepted. Rex walked a slow circle around him, his steps light but deliberate, then came to rest at his side, his posture calm, his attention no longer searching ahead but centered in the present, as if the path forward no longer needed to be discovered, only chosen. Ethan turned toward the tunnel entrance, the direction that led back to the world above, the faint square of light barely visible in the distance. And for a moment, he imagined what would happen if he simply walked away, closed the hatch, and left everything exactly as it was. The gold would remain. The system would continue its silent watch, and the world would go on unaware of what lay beneath it. But the thought did not settle comfortably. It felt incomplete, like a story paused before its purpose had been fulfilled. He looked down at the case again, then at the key in his hand, understanding now that this was not about taking anything from this place. It was about allowing it to do what it had been built to do. He stepped back toward the console and gently placed the case on the platform, opening it once more with steady hands, the documents inside catching the soft light as he carefully removed them, one by one, laying them flat against the surface. Rex remained still beside him, watching without interruption, as if recognizing the significance of each small movement. Ethan followed the instructions he had read, aligning the documents with the markings etched into the console, each placement precise, intentional, as if the system itself guided his hands through memory, rather than guesswork. When the final page was set in place, the room responded again, not with sudden motion, but with a gradual shift in the light, a deepening warmth that spread across the walls, the pulse beneath the floor expanding outward once more, steady and assured. Panels along the sides began to adjust subtly, not opening fully as before, but reconfiguring, preparing, as if the system was transitioning from waiting to readiness. Ethan stepped back slightly, observing the changes with quiet understanding. This was never meant to remain hidden indefinitely. It was meant to be activated when the time was right, and perhaps that time had finally come. Rex exhaled softly and lowered his head, the last trace of tension leaving his posture. And in that moment, Ethan felt the same sense of completion settle within him, not because everything had been revealed, but because the purpose had become clear. And as the room continued its slow, deliberate awakening, he knew that what came next would not be controlled by him alone, but guided by the very system that had waited all these years, ready to return what had been preserved back to the world that had always belonged to. The transition was so quiet that if Ethan had not been standing there, he might have missed it entirely, the soft glow of the room stabilizing into a steady, balanced light that no longer shifted or pulsed, the hum beneath the floor settling into silence as if its purpose had been completed. not ended, but fulfilled. Ethan remained still for a moment, his eyes moving slowly across the space that had revealed itself piece by piece. No longer hidden, no longer waiting, but ready. Rex stepped forward and then stopped, his posture relaxed in a way that spoke of certainty rather than caution, the kind of calm that comes when a path has reached its natural end. Ethan closed the metal case gently, securing the documents inside once more, not to hide them, but to carry them forward with the same care they had been given. He looked at the platform one last time, at the markings, the structure, the quiet intelligence of a system that had endured beyond its creators, and he understood something simple and clear. This place had never needed a witness. It had needed a keeper, someone who would recognize its purpose and allow it to continue beyond the moment of discovery. He turned toward the tunnel, the way back leading upward, and began to walk, his steps steady, unhurried, Rex moving beside him with that same quiet loyalty that had guided him from the beginning. The tunnel felt different now, not because it had changed, but because he had. The walls no longer felt like barriers or secrets. They felt like a path that had done its job. The chamber of crates passed by in silence, the gold still resting where it had always been, untouched, not forgotten, but no longer the center of what mattered. The ladder appeared ahead, the faint square of daylight growing larger with each step, and as Ethan climbed back into the warehouse, the cold air of the outside world met him with a familiar stillness, the wind brushing against the rusted walls, the distant hum of the town carrying on as it always had, unchanged. Unaware, Rex stepped out behind him and paused, looking back once before turning forward again, and Ethan followed that motion, not looking down into the opening again, not because he was ignoring it, but because he understood it no longer needed to be watched. He pulled the hatch closed carefully, the metal settling into place with a quiet finality, the warehouse returning to its silent, weathered appearance. Just another forgotten building to anyone passing by, but not to him. Never again. He stood there for a moment, the case in his hand, the weight of it steady and certain. Then he turned and walked toward the open door, the light outside soft and wide, the world waiting in the same way it always had. And as Rex moved ahead, guiding without urgency, Ethan stepped forward with a quiet understanding that some things are not hidden to be kept. They are hidden to be found by the ones who will carry them forward. And sometimes, the greatest discovery is not what you uncover beneath the ground, but what you choose to become when you rise back into the light.